The warning came without mercy. It arrived on every human colony at the same moment, broadcast across frequencies that nobody knew existed. The message was simple and cold. The Zynthian Imperium demanded complete surrender. Every human world would submit to their rule. Every human ship would be stripped of weapons. Every human government would dissolve and accept alien overlords. The alternative was death. Captain Daniel Morgan stood on the bridge of his ship, the Valiant, and read the message 3 times. He was a tall man with gray streaking through his dark hair, a veteran of 20 years in space. He had fought pirates in the outer colonies and survived ship failures that killed better men. But this was different. This was an entire empire telling humanity to bend the knee or die. Around him, his crew worked in silence. Lieutenant Kate Sullivan sat at the tactical station, her fingers moving across holographic displays. She was younger than Daniel, only 30 years old, but she had sharp instincts and never panicked. Commander Ryan Cooper handled communications, his face tight with worry. Paul Graham ran engineering, keeping the ship alive through systems that should have failed years ago. The Zynthians were reptilian creatures, standing over 7 feet tall with scales that looked like oil spreading on water. They ruled 400 star systems and had never lost a war. Their ships were ancient and powerful, refined over thousands of years. When they conquered a species, that species stayed conquered. There was no escape and no second chance. Daniel looked at his crew and saw the same thought in every face. Humanity had spent 200 years clawing its way off Earth. They survived wars that nearly destroyed the species. They survived plagues that killed billions. They survived the endless cold of space and built homes on worlds that wanted them dead. They did not survive all of that just to become slaves to aliens. Kate spoke first, her voice calm. The Zynthian fleet is gathering at Arcturus. 20 battle cruisers so far, maybe more coming. They are setting up a blockade around the colony. If we do nothing, 3 million people will be trapped there. Daniel nodded slowly. He had family on Arcturus. His sister ran a medical clinic there. His nephew was starting university. They were ordinary people living ordinary lives, and now an alien empire wanted to take everything from them. Send a message to Admiral Grant, Daniel said. Tell her we are ready. Admiral Helen Grant received the message on the bridge of humanity's greatest secret. It was called the Dreadnought, and it was not really a ship. It was a weapon the size of a city. For 10 years, humanity had poured every resource into building it. Every breakthrough in physics went into its design. Every drop of exotic matter harvested from dead stars went into its armor. Every genius engineer in human space contributed something to make it work. The Dreadnought was 3 miles long and half a mile wide. Its hull was made from composite materials that could survive direct hits from nuclear weapons. Its surface was covered with rail cannons that fired tungsten slugs at nearly the speed of light. It had plasma batteries that could boil oceans and missile tubes that launched warheads capable of cracking planets, and at its heart sat the Helios cannon, a weapon that channeled the power of a miniature fusion reactor into a beam of pure destruction. Helen Grant was 57 years old, with silver streaking through her auburn hair and eyes that had seen too much death. She had commanded ships during the colony wars, fought battles that historians still studied, and lost friends in every conflict. She did not want this war, but if the Zynthians wanted a fight, she would give them one they would never forget. She stood from her command throne, a massive chair surrounded by holographic displays. Around her, hundreds of crew members worked at their stations. They were the best humanity had to offer, pilots who could thread a needle at full thrust, gunners who could hit targets across thousands of miles, engineers who could keep fusion reactors stable under combat stress. They had trained for years, knowing this day might come. All stations prepare for departure, Helen announced. Her voice carried through every deck of the massive ship. We move to Arcturus in 1 hour. The Zynthians want to know what humanity is made of. Let us show them. The crew responded immediately. Fusion reactors powered up, filling the ship with energy. Weapon systems came online one by one, until the Dreadnought bristled with enough firepower to level continents. Navigation plotted the jump to Arcturus, calculating hyperspace coordinates that would bring them out right in the middle of the Zynthian fleet. On the Valiant, Daniel watched as other human ships gathered. There were 30 vessels in total, a mix of frigates and destroyers. They were fast and maneuverable but lightly armed compared to Zynthian cruisers. Against 20 Zynthian ships, they would normally be outmatched. But they were not fighting alone. They had the Dreadnought. Kate pulled up tactical data on her display. The Xinthians have never seen anything like the Dreadnought. Their intelligence reports show they think we are barely capable of spaceflight. They believe we have no real weapons, no real defenses. They are about to learn how wrong they are. Paul called up from engineering. All systems are green, Captain. The Valiant is ready for combat. Just say the word. Daniel looked at the view screen where stars stretched and twisted as ships prepared to jump into hyperspace. He thought about his sister on Arcturus, about the 3 million people who had no idea a war was about to start above their heads. He thought about humanity, a young species that had barely left its home system, now facing an empire older than human civilization. The word is given, Daniel said quietly. All ships jump on my mark. Let us remind the galaxy that humanity does not surrender. Space twisted and tore as 30 human ships vanished into hyperspace. They emerged seconds later at Arcturus, dropping out of faster-than-light travel right where they planned. The Xinthian fleet was there, 20 massive cruisers arranged in a crescent formation around the colony world. They were beautiful ships, sleek and angular, covered in symbols of conquest that dated back millennia. The Xinthian commander, Vraxis, sat on his bridge and watched the human ships appear. He was an old warrior, his scales darkened with age and covered in scars from 100 battles. He had conquered species that fought with nuclear weapons and antimatter bombs. Humanity had nothing that could threaten him. Open a channel to the human ships, Vraxis ordered. His voice was deep and cold, the voice of a predator that had never known fear. Let us give them one final chance to surrender. The view screen on the Valiant flickered to life. Vraxis appeared, his golden eyes gleaming with confidence. His forked tongue flicked out as he spoke in heavily accented but fluent English. Humans, your defiance has been noted. Surrender now, and we will grant you the mercy of servitude. Resist, and we will erase your species from existence. You have 10 minutes to decide. Daniel stared at the alien commander and felt something cold settle in his chest. This was the moment. Everything humanity had built, everything they had survived came down to this decision. He could surrender and save lives in the short term, or he could fight and risk everything. Commander Vraxis, Daniel said slowly, I am Captain Daniel Morgan of the United Nations Space Force. You have made a grave mistake. Humanity does not surrender. We adapt, we endure, and when threatened, we fight with everything we have. Vraxis hissed, a sound that might have been laughter. Brave words from a species that has barely left its cradle. Your ships are toys compared to ours. You cannot win this fight. Then watch closely, Daniel replied. Ryan, cut the transmission. Kate, send the signal. The transmission ended. For a moment, there was only silence. The Xinthian fleet waited, confident in their superiority. The human ships held position, seemingly frozen in fear. Then the Dreadnought arrived. It emerged from behind Arcturus Prime's moon like a mountain rising from the ocean. The Xinthian sensors went wild, trying to process what they were seeing. The ship was impossible. Nothing that large should be able to move. Nothing that heavily armed should exist. On his bridge, Vraxis felt something he had not experienced in 50 years of warfare. Fear. It started as a cold sensation in his chest and spread through his body. The human ship was a monster, bristling with weapons that could destroy his entire fleet. All ships, evasive maneuvers, Vraxis shouted. Prepare to open fire. But Admiral Grant was faster. Fire the Helios cannon, she ordered calmly. The Dreadnought shuddered as power surged through its systems. Deep inside the ship, magnetic coils aligned and a miniature star ignited. A beam of white-hot energy lanced across space, so bright it lit up the entire star system. It struck Vraxis's flagship dead center. The ship's shields, designed to withstand sustained bombardment, collapsed instantly. The hull buckled and tore. The ship exploded in a fireball that could be seen from the surface of Arcturus. The Xinthian fleet hesitated. For the first time in 3 centuries, they faced an enemy they did not understand. An enemy that could destroy their most powerful ships with a single shot. All batteries open fire, Helen said quietly. Show them what humanity can do. The Dreadnought unleashed hell. Rail cannons fired in sequence, each shot hitting with the force of a small asteroid impact. Plasma batteries painted space with streams of superheated gas. Missiles streaked toward their targets, tracking systems locked on with machine precision. And through it all, the Helios cannon charge. News of the battle spread across the galaxy faster than light. In every corner of known space, species that had bent the knee to the Xinthian Imperium heard the impossible story. A young species called humanity had faced down a Xinthian fleet and won. They destroyed 12 cruisers and sent the rest running. The story sounded like fantasy, but sensor logs and surviving witnesses confirmed every detail. On the Xinthian homeworld of Xinther Prime, Emperor Zalthros sat on his throne and listened to the reports. He was 300 years old, ancient even by the standards of his long-lived species. His scales had darkened to deep black with age and his eyes burned with cold intelligence. He had ruled the Imperium for 2 centuries, expanding its borders and crushing every species that dared resist. Commander Vraxis had survived the battle at Arcturus. He stood before the Emperor now, his head lowered in shame. 12 ships were destroyed, thousands of warriors killed. The Xinthian fleet had retreated in disorder, something that had not happened in living memory. It was a humiliation that burned like acid. Emperor Zalthros listened to the report in silence. When Vraxis finished speaking, the Emperor stood slowly. His massive frame cast a shadow across the throne room. "You failed," he said quietly. His voice was soft but carried the weight of absolute authority. "You allowed a primitive species to humiliate the Imperium." Vraxis kept his head lowered. "My Emperor, the humans possess a weapon we did not anticipate, a ship of enormous size and power. Our intelligence failed to detect it during our observations. We were unprepared for such resistance." Zalthros walked down from his throne, his claws clicking on the polished floor. "Unprepared," he repeated. "The Xinthian Imperium has conquered 400 star systems. We have faced species with technology beyond anything these humans possess, and yet you were unprepared." The Emperor stopped in front of Vraxis. The old commander could feel the heat radiating from the Emperor's body, a sign of barely controlled rage. "You will redeem yourself," Zalthros said. "Assemble the Grand Armada, every available warship, every warrior. We will crush these humans so thoroughly that no species will dare defy us again." Vraxis raised his head, surprise flickering in his golden eyes. "The Grand Armada, my Emperor? That is over 200 ships. Surely such force is not necessary against one primitive world." Zalthros struck Vraxis across the face with the back of his hand. The blow sent the old commander staggering. "Necessary," the Emperor hissed. "You dare question me? The humans have shown they can fight. They have shown they can win. If we do not crush them completely, other species will see it as weakness. The entire Imperium will begin to fracture." Vraxis straightened, blood dripping from a cut on his face. He bowed deeply. "As you command, my Emperor. I will personally lead the Grand Armada. The humans will be destroyed." "No," Zalthros said. "You have failed once already. I will lead the Armada myself. It has been too long since I commanded in battle. The humans will learn what it means to face the full might of the Xinthian Imperium." On Earth, the United Nations Security Council met in emergency session. The chamber was packed with delegates from every human colony and nation. Secretary General Linda Hayes stood at the podium, her face grave. She was a small woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She had led humanity through economic crises and natural disasters. Now she faced the greatest challenge in human history. "Ladies and gentlemen," Linda began, "we have won a battle, but we have not won the war. Intelligence reports indicate the Xinthians are mobilizing their full military strength. They are assembling what they call the Grand Armada, over 200 warships. Emperor Zalthros himself will lead them." A murmur ran through the chamber. Everyone knew what this meant. The Xinthians were not sending another fleet to test human defenses. They were sending everything they had to wipe humanity from existence. General Carlos Diaz stood and activated a holographic display. The general was a broad-shouldered man with close-cropped gray hair and a face weathered by decades of military service. The display showed human-controlled space, a small cluster of systems connected by fragile trade routes. "We have 30 ships of the line," Carlos said bluntly. "The Xinthians are bringing 200. In a direct engagement, we will lose. But we are not going to fight them directly. We are going to make them bleed for every inch of space they take." He expanded the display to show asteroid fields, nebulae, and stellar anomalies. "We will use the terrain. The Tiberius Nebula is dense enough to disrupt sensors and communications. The Oort cloud around Sol offers thousands of hiding places. We will hit them where they are weak and disappear before they can respond." A delegate from Mars Colony stood up. "General, even with guerrilla tactics, we cannot win against such overwhelming force. What is the endgame here? Are we just delaying the inevitable?" Carlos met the delegate's eyes. "The endgame is survival. Every day we delay them is another day for our shipyards to build more vessels. Every battle we win is another blow to their morale. The Xinthians have ruled through fear for centuries. If we show them that humanity cannot be broken, that fear works both ways. Linda Hayes spoke again. The Council has authorized full military mobilization. Every able-bodied person who volunteers will be trained. Every factory will be converted to war production. Every scientific team will focus on improving our weapons and defenses. If the Xinthians want a war, we will give them one that lasts generations if necessary. The delegates voted unanimously. Humanity would fight. On the Dreadnought, Admiral Helen Grant supervised repairs. The massive ship floated in a construction dock near Mars, surrounded by smaller vessels and repair platforms. Welding torches sparked against the hull, sealing breaches and replacing damaged armor. Inside, engineering teams worked around the clock to restore damaged systems. Helen walked through the corridors, checking on different sections. She stopped in engineering, where Paul Graham directed his teams with quiet efficiency. The chief engineer looked exhausted, his uniform stained with grease and his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. "How are we looking, Commander?" Helen asked. Paul wiped sweat from his forehead. "The Helios cannon took damage to its primary cooling system. We are rebuilding it now. Should be operational in 48 hours. The rail cannons are at 80% capacity. Plasma batteries are fully functional. Overall, we will be ready when they come." Helen nodded. "What about the crew? Are they holding up?" Paul smiled tiredly. "Morale is high, Admiral. Everyone knows what we are up against. Nobody is backing down. If anything, they are angry. The Xinthians thought they could intimidate us. Now they know better." Helen continued her walk, eventually reaching the observation deck. Captain Daniel Morgan was there, staring out at the stars. His ship, the Valiant, had been destroyed in the battle. He barely escaped with his life. Now he served on the Dreadnought as tactical advisor. "You should be resting," Helen said quietly. Daniel shook his head. "Cannot sleep. Keep thinking about the people we lost. 3 frigates went down. Over 600 crew members. Good people who followed orders and died for it." Helen stood beside him. "I know. I have been in command long enough to know that feeling. It never gets easier. But those people died buying time for humanity to prepare. They died heroes." Daniel turned to face her. "Admiral, what happens if we lose the next battle? What happens if the Dreadnought goes down?" Helen was quiet for a moment. "Then we make sure it costs them everything. The Xinthians have never faced real resistance. They have never fought an enemy that refused to surrender. Even if we lose, we will hurt them so badly that other species will see it. We will show the galaxy that humanity would rather die fighting than live on our knees." Daniel looked back at the stars. "When do we move out?" 12 hours. The Xinthian armada is 3 days away. We will meet them at the Tiberius Nebula. General Diaz wants us to use the interference to our advantage. Make it a close-quarters fight where their numbers matter less. Across human space, preparations continued. Shipyards worked at maximum capacity, churning out frigates and destroyers as fast as resources allowed. Training centers filled with volunteers, people from every walk of life learning to fight. Scientists developed new weapons, new tactics, new ways to hurt an enemy that seemed invincible. On colony worlds, people watched the news and prayed. Children asked their parents if the monsters were real. Parents held their children and lied, saying everything would be fine. But everyone knew the truth. The Xinthian Empire was coming, and humanity's survival hung by a thread. The Grand Armada assembled at the edge of Xinthian space. 200 warships, each one a masterpiece of ancient technology. Their hulls gleamed in the light of distant stars. Their weapons could reduce planets to ash. Their crews were veteran warriors who had never known defeat. Emperor Zalthro stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion. The ship was massive, nearly as large as the human Dreadnought. It had been his personal vessel for a century, a symbol of imperial power that made entire civilizations surrender at the sight of it. "All ships, report status," Zalthros commanded. One by one, the fleet captains reported in. Every ship was ready. Every crew was prepared. The Armada represented the full might of an empire that had conquered half the galaxy. "Set course for human space," Zalthros ordered. "We will show these primitives what happens when they defy the Imperium." The Tiberius Nebula erupted into chaos. The swirling clouds of gas and dust became a battlefield unlike anything the galaxy had seen. The interference from the nebula scrambled sensors and made targeting difficult. Ships appeared and disappeared in the haze like ghosts. What should have been a clean military engagement became a knife fight in the dark. The Dreadnought anchored the human defense, its massive bulk impossible to miss even in the nebula. Rail cannons fired continuously, each shot illuminating the clouds with bright flashes. The tungsten slugs traveled at nearly the speed of light, punching through Xinthian shields and armor with devastating effect. Plasma batteries painted arcs of superheated gas across space, melting anything they touched. Admiral Helen Grant watched the tactical display as it flickered and updated. The interference made it hard to track everything, but she could see the pattern. The Xinthians were trying to surround them, using their superior numbers to attack from multiple angles. It was a sound strategy against a conventional fleet, but the Dreadnought was anything but conventional. Kate Sullivan worked her tactical station with intense focus. "Target the cruiser at bearing 270, she called out. "Rail cannons 1 through 5 fire on my mark." Mark 5 rail cannons fired as one. The shots converged on a Xinthian cruiser that was trying to flank them. The first 3 shots collapsed its shields. The 4th and 5th punched through the hull and detonated the ship's reactor. The cruiser broke apart in a silent explosion that lit up a section of the nebula. The human frigates used the nebula's interference to their advantage. They were smaller and faster than the Xinthian cruisers, able to dart in and out of the clouds. Captain Daniel Morgan, now commanding from the Dreadnought's auxiliary bridge, coordinated their attacks. "Frigate Phoenix, break left and engage the damaged cruiser at your 3 o'clock, Daniel ordered. "Frigate Horizon, cover their approach. We need to keep the enemy off balance." The frigates moved like sharks, striking at wounded prey and disappearing before the Xinthians could respond. It was guerrilla warfare on a massive scale, using every advantage they could find. But the Xinthians were adapting. They began firing blind into the clouds, saturating areas with plasma fire in hopes of hitting something. One of those blind shots found the frigate Valkyrie. The plasma lance struck its engine section and the small ship disappeared in a ball of fire. 20 crew members died instantly. Daniel watched it happen and felt the familiar weight of command settle on his shoulders. Good people dying while he gave orders from safety, but there was no time to mourn. 2 more Xinthian cruisers were pushing through the nebula toward the Dreadnought. They fired in coordinated volleys, their plasma lances converging on the massive ship's hull. The armor held, but damage reports started coming in. Paul Graham's voice came over the intercom from engineering. "Admiral, we have breaches on decks 7 and 9, sealing them now, but we are taking damage faster than we can repair it. We need to reduce incoming fire." Helen made a decision. "Helm, bring us about. Point our bow directly at the Eternal Dominion. Weapons, charge the Helios cannon. Let us remind the Emperor what we are capable of." The Dreadnought turned, its massive bulk moving with surprising grace. The Helios cannon began to charge, power building in its core. Emperor Zelthros saw it on his tactical display and understood immediately what was happening. "All ships, concentrate fire on that vessel," Zelthros commanded. "Do not let them complete their charge." A dozen Xinthian cruisers turned their weapons on the Dreadnought. Plasma lances and missile salvos converged on the human ship. The armor buckled and cracked. Entire sections were vaporized. But the Helios cannon continued to charge. Kate watched her display as the charge built. 15 seconds to full power. "The ship is taking heavy damage, Admiral. Multiple hull breaches. Casualties across all decks. Hold steady," Helen replied. "All we need is one good shot, 10 seconds. The Dreadnought shuddered under sustained bombardment. Warning alarms blared across every deck. Crew members scrambled to contain fires and seal breaches. Some sections were simply gone, blown away by enemy fire. 5 seconds. Emperor Zelthros realized the Dreadnought was not going to stop. The humans were willing to take catastrophic damage just for one shot at his flagship. The thought sent a chill through him. What kind of species sacrifice so much for so little? "Fire," Helen commanded. The Helios cannon unleashed its full power. A beam of pure energy, brighter than any star, lanced across the nebula. It struck the Eternal Dominion's shields and burned through them in seconds. The beam carved into the flagship's hull, cutting through armor and structure like a hot knife through butter. But Zelthros had prepared for this. His ship was built to survive. Redundant shields activated, slowing the beam. Emergency bulkheads sealed, containing the damage. The Eternal Dominion survived, but it was crippled. Entire sections were destroyed. Its main weapons were offline. The flagship that had terrorized 100 worlds was reduced to a burning wreck. Zalthros pulled himself up from where the impact had thrown him. His bridge was in chaos. Crew members lay dead or wounded. Systems sparked and smoked. For the first time in his long life, he understood what it meant to face an enemy that would not yield. All ships, fall back, Zalthros ordered. Regroup outside the nebula. We will reassess and attack again. But the human fleet was not giving them time to regroup. The frigates pressed the attack, hunting down damaged Xinthian cruisers. The Dreadnought, despite its wounds, continued to fire. Every weapon that still functioned poured destruction into the enemy fleet. Daniel coordinated the frigates with cold precision. Frigate Storm, the cruiser at bearing 185, is venting atmosphere. Finish it. Frigate Thunder, cover Storm's approach. The Xinthian retreat became a rout. Ships fled into hyperspace as soon as they could charge their drives. Some were destroyed before they could escape. Others limped away with critical damage. The Grand Armada, the pride of the Xinthian Imperium, was broken. When the last enemy ship jumped away, silence fell over the battlefield. The nebula drifted slowly, its clouds illuminated by the dying fires of destroyed ships. Both sides had paid a terrible price. The Xinthians had lost over 40 ships. The humans had lost 8 frigates, and the Dreadnought was barely functional. Admiral Helen Grant stood on her bridge and surveyed the damage reports. The Helios cannon was offline, its cooling system destroyed. Half the rail cannons were non-functional. The ship's armor was breached in dozens of places. Casualty reports showed over 300 dead and twice that many wounded, but they were still alive. Still fighting. All ships, this is Admiral Grant, she transmitted. The enemy has withdrawn. Begin search and rescue operations for any survivors. Damage control teams focus on critical systems first. We did good today, people. We showed the Xinthians that humanity cannot be intimidated. Daniel joined her on the main bridge. His face was smudged with smoke and his uniform was torn, but his eyes were sharp. We hurt them badly, Admiral, but they still have over 150 ships. They will come back, Helen nodded. I know. And when they do, we need to be ready. But for now, we have bought time. Time for Earth to build more ships. Time for the colonies to fortify. Time for humanity to show the galaxy what we are made of. Kate approached them, her face pale but determined. Admiral, I am getting reports from across the fleet. Morale is high despite our losses. The crews know we hurt them worse than they hurt us. Nobody is talking about surrender. Good, Helen replied. Because we are not done yet. Not by a long shot. On the crippled Eternal Dominion, Emperor Zalthros stared at the casualty reports. 40 ships destroyed, thousands of warriors dead, his flagship reduced to a wreck. And the humans were still fighting, still defiant. It was inconceivable. It was infuriating. It was terrifying. An aide approached cautiously. My Emperor, the fleet commanders are requesting orders. Shall we regroup and attack again? Zalthros was silent for a long moment. He thought about the battle, about how the humans had fought. They used the terrain. They sacrificed their own ships to save others. They damaged his flagship with a weapon that should not exist. These were not primitives stumbling through space. These were warriors. Gather the fleet, Zalthros finally said. We will return to Xinthian space and reassess. The humans have proven themselves more dangerous than anticipated. We need a new strategy. The aide looked shocked. My Emperor, we still outnumber them. If we attack now while they are damaged, we can destroy them. Zalthros turned to face the aide. His eyes burned with cold fury. Do you think I am a fool? Yes, we outnumber them, but they have shown they can hurt us badly even when outnumbered. If we attack again now, we will lose more ships, more warriors. And for what? To destroy one human vessel? No. We will return home, repair our ships, and come back with a force so overwhelming that even these humans cannot stand against it. The Grand Armada limped back to Xinthian space. News of the battle spread even faster than before. The Xinthian Imperium, undefeated for 3 centuries, had been forced to retreat. Not once but twice. Species across the galaxy began to whisper about rebellion. If humanity could stand against the Imperium, maybe others could too. On Earth, the news was met with both celebration and concern. Humanity had won another battle, but everyone knew the war was far from over. The Xinthians would. 3 months passed. The human fleet rebuilt and expanded. Shipyards across Sol system worked around the clock, producing new frigates and destroyers. The Dreadnought underwent massive repairs, emerging stronger than before. New weapons were installed. Armor was reinforced. The Helios cannon was rebuilt with improved cooling systems that would allow for rapid fire. But the most important change was not in the ships. It was in the people. Humanity had tasted victory against impossible odds. They had faced the greatest empire in the galaxy and made it bleed. That confidence spread like fire, transforming fear into determination. Volunteers continued to flood recruitment centers. Every citizen wanted to contribute somehow. Admiral Helen Grant stood in the newly rebuilt bridge of the Dreadnought. Everything gleamed with fresh construction. New consoles replaced damaged ones. The tactical display was sharper and faster. The crew moved with practiced efficiency, their training refined by real combat experience. Daniel Morgan had been promoted to captain and given command of a new frigate, the Defiant. But he spent much of his time on the Dreadnought, helping Helen plan for the next engagement. They both knew it was coming. The Xinthians would not accept defeat. They would return with everything they had. The question was when. Kate Sullivan worked at her tactical station, monitoring long-range sensors. She had been promoted to commander and was now Helen's chief tactical officer. Her job was to predict enemy movements and prepare countermeasures. She took the responsibility seriously, often working 18-hour shifts. "Admiral, I am picking up something," Kate said suddenly. "Multiple hyperspace signatures, big ones. They are coming from Xinthian space." Helen was at Kate's station in 3 strides. "Show me." The display lit up with dozens of contacts. No, hundreds. The Xinthian armada was returning, and they had brought reinforcements. Intelligence estimates suggested over 300 ships. They had spent 3 months gathering every available warship from across their empire. "Sound General Quarters?" Helen ordered. "Get me General Diaz on the comm. All ships are to proceed to Rally Point Alpha immediately." The Dreadnought's alarms blared to life. Across the ship, crew members rushed to battle stations. In the ship's belly, Paul Graham supervised the startup of the main reactor. Power surged through the massive vessel, bringing weapons and shields online. General Carlos Diaz appeared on the main view screen. His face was grim. "We are tracking them, Admiral. They are not heading for Sol. They are going straight for Alpha Centauri. 3 billion people live there." Helen felt ice form in her stomach. Alpha Centauri was humanity's oldest colony. It was where the first-generation ships had landed 2 centuries ago. It was the heart of human expansion into space. If the Xinthians destroyed it, the psychological blow would be devastating. "How long do we have?" Helen asked. 12 hours, maybe less. "They are moving fast. We can get the fleet there, but it will be close. Then we move now. Send the orders. Every ship that can fight meets us at Alpha Centauri. We are not letting them take that colony." The human fleet assembled quickly. 70 ships now, twice what they had 3 months ago. New frigates with improved weapons, destroyers with advanced shields, and at the center, the Dreadnought ready to prove itself again. On his frigate, Captain Daniel Morgan briefed his crew. They were young, most of them fresh from training, but they were determined. They had heard the stories of the previous battles. They wanted their chance to prove themselves. "Listen up," Daniel said, his voice carrying through the ship's intercom. "The Xinthians are coming with 300 ships. We have 70. Those numbers would scare most people. But we are not most people. We are human. We do not give up. We do not back down. Today we show them again that humanity cannot be conquered." The crew responded with a roar of approval. Daniel felt it too, that fire burning in his chest. The same fire that drove humanity to survive ice ages and plagues and wars. The same fire that pushed them into space despite every obstacle. That fire would carry them through this battle. The human fleet arrived at Alpha Centauri just as the Xinthian armada dropped out of hyperspace. 300 ships appeared like a swarm of locusts blotting out the stars. They formed up in perfect battle formation, a wall of weapons and armor that stretched across space. Emperor Zalthros commanded from a new flagship, the Infinite Conquest. His old ship, the Eternal Dominion, was still being repaired. This new vessel was even larger, built specifically to counter the human Dreadnought. It carried weapons that could match the Helios cannon, shields that could withstand sustained bombardment. Zalthros had learned from the previous battles. He would not make the same mistakes. "Humans, this is your final warning," Zalthros broadcast. "Surrender Alpha Centauri or watch it burn. You have 1 hour to evacuate the civilian population. After that, we will begin orbital bombardment." Admiral Helen Grant responded immediately. Emperor Zalthros, this is Admiral Grant. We do not evacuate. We do not surrender. If you want Alpha Centauri, you will have to go through us. And I promise you, we will make you pay for every meter. Zalthros hissed with frustration. You sacrifice your people for pride. Very well, all ships begin the attack. Destroy the human fleet. Show no mercy. The Xinthian armada surged forward. 300 ships moving as one, their weapons already charging. The human fleet held position, forming a defensive line between the armada and Alpha Centauri. 70 ships against 300, 4-to-1 odds. Any military analyst would call it suicide. Helen stood on her bridge and watched the enemy approach. Her hands were steady. Her voice was calm. All batteries prepare to fire. Wait for optimal range. Make every shot count. Kate tracked the enemy ships on her display. They are spreading out, trying to flank us. Recommend we focus fire on their center and punch through their formation. Agreed, Helen replied. All ships concentrate fire on the center of their line. We are going to split them in half. The Dreadnought's weapons came alive. Rail cannons fired in sequence, each shot streaking across space. Plasma batteries painted arcs of destruction. The Helios cannon charged, preparing to deliver its devastating payload. Around the massive ship, frigates and destroyers added their firepower. The Xinthian center formation took the brunt of the attack. Ships exploded. Shields collapsed. The perfect battle line began to break apart, but they kept coming. For every ship destroyed, 2 more took its place. They had the numbers to absorb casualties that would break any other fleet. Return fire, Zalthros commanded. All ships concentrate on the Dreadnought. I want that ship destroyed. Hundreds of weapons turned toward the massive human ship. Plasma lances converged on its hull. Missiles streaked through space. The Dreadnought's shields flared bright under the assault, energy bleeding off in brilliant cascades. But the shields held. The ship's armor absorbed what got through, and its weapons never stopped firing. Paul Graham shouted updates from engineering. Shields at 60%. Armor holding. All primary systems operational. We can take this beating all day, Admiral. Good, Helen replied. Because we are not done yet. Fire the Helios cannon. Target the Infinite Conquest. The Helios cannon unleashed its power. The beam struck Zalthros' flagship directly, but unlike the Eternal Dominion, this ship was ready. Advanced shields, designed specifically to counter directed energy weapons, absorbed most of the blast. The ship shuddered and systems flickered, but it survived. Zalthros smiled coldly. Return fire with our main weapon. Show them we can match their technology. The Infinite Conquest fired its own directed energy weapon. The blast struck the Dreadnought's forward shields and burned through them. Armor melted, hull plates buckled. Alarms blared across the ship as damage reports flooded in. Kate checked her displays. Forward shields down. Hull breaches on decks 1 through 5. Casualties reported, but the ship is still operational. Helen gripped her command throne. They adapted. They built weapons to counter ours. We need to change tactics. All frigates break formation. Begin hit-and-run attacks on their flanks. Keep them off balance. Daniel received the orders and immediately went to work. All ships, you heard the Admiral. We split into groups of 5. Hit their flanks, hit them hard, then get out before they can respond. Make them chase us. The human frigates broke formation and scattered. They were like wolves attacking a herd, darting in to strike at vulnerable targets before disappearing. The Xinthian fleet tried to respond, but their massive numbers became a disadvantage. Ships got in each other's way. Communications became confused. The perfect military formation dissolved into chaos. Daniel led his group of 5 frigates in a strike against a cluster of Xinthian cruisers. Fire torpedoes full spread, he ordered. Target their engine sections. Torpedoes streaked through space. 3 found their marks, crippling Xinthian cruisers. Before the enemy could respond, the frigates were gone, racing away to strike somewhere else. Emperor Zalthros watched his tactical display and felt frustration building. The humans were refusing to fight a conventional battle. They used their smaller numbers as an advantage, staying mobile and striking where he was weak. His fleet was taking casualties at an alarming rate. All ships tighten formation, Zalthros ordered. Do not let them scatter us. Maintain discipline. But tightening the formation made them vulnerable to the Dreadnought. Helen saw the opportunity immediately. They are bunching up. The Xinthian Imperium was in turmoil. Emperor Zalthros returned to his homeworld to find his authority questioned for the first time in 200 years. The Grand Armada had been defeated twice. Over 200 ships were destroyed or damaged beyond repair. Thousands of warriors were dead, and the humans were still fighting. The Council of War gathered in the Imperial Palace. Military commanders from across the Empire stood before Zalthros, their expressions ranging from anger to fear. They had never faced an enemy like humanity, an enemy that refused to accept defeat, an enemy that grew stronger with each battle. "We must negotiate," one commander said. His scales were pale with age and his voice trembled. "The humans have proven they cannot be conquered through conventional warfare. Perhaps we can reach an agreement. Grant them independence in exchange for peace." Zalthros turned his burning gaze on the speaker. "Negotiate? You want the Zynthian Imperium to negotiate with primitives who have barely left their home system? Such weakness would destroy us. Every species we have conquered would see it as a sign to rebel." "Then what do you propose, my emperor?" another commander asked. "We have thrown everything at them. Our best ships, our finest warriors, and still they stand. What more can we do?" Zalthros was silent for a long moment. He thought about the battles, about how the humans fought. They used strategy over strength. They sacrificed pieces to win the larger game. They adapted to every situation. Fighting them conventionally was a losing strategy. "We will change our approach," Zalthros finally said. "No more direct assaults. We will cut them off. Blockade their trade routes, starve their colonies, force them to come to us, and when they do, we will destroy them in battles of our choosing." The commanders looked at each other. It was a sound strategy. Humanity's colonies depended on trade for survival. Cut off those supply lines and the colonies would wither, but it would take time. Years, possibly. The Imperium had never fought such a long war. "Begin immediately," Zalthros ordered. "Deploy our fleets to blockade positions. No human ship gets through. And send word to our allies. Tell them the Imperium offers rewards for any who attack human colonies. Let us see how they handle fighting on multiple fronts." On Earth, Admiral Helen Grant received reports of the new Zynthian strategy. She stood in the war room with General Carlos Diaz and Secretary General Linda Hayes. A holographic display showed human space surrounded by red markers indicating Zynthian blockade positions. "They are trying to starve us out," Carlos said. "Smart move. Our colonies cannot survive without trade. Food, medical supplies, industrial materials. Everything moves between systems. Cut that off and people start dying within months." "Can we break the blockades?" Linda asked. "Not easily," Helen replied. "They are using smaller fleets at multiple positions. If we concentrate our forces to break one blockade, they will just reinforce it or attack somewhere else. They have more ships than we do. They can afford to spread out." "Then we need to make them spread out even more," Linda said. "What about attacking their territory? Force them to defend their own worlds instead of blockading ours?" Helen considered the idea. It was risky. Taking the fight into Zynthian space meant operating far from human support. But it might be their only option. We would need fast ships, hit-and-run tactics, make them afraid to leave their homeworlds undefended. Carlos nodded slowly. "We could build more frigates, focus on speed and stealth rather than heavy armor, strike at their colonies and supply depots, make them feel the pain we are feeling." "Do it," Linda ordered. "Begin production immediately, and get me a list of potential targets in Zynthian space. If they want a long war, we will give them one they will never forget." Over the next 6 months, the war transformed. The large fleet battles stopped. Instead, the conflict became a series of raids and counter-raids. Human frigates struck deep into Zynthian territory, destroying supply depots and communication stations. The Zynthians responded by attacking human colonies with smaller fleets, trying to spread human defenses thin. Captain Daniel Morgan commanded one of the new raid groups. His squadron consisted of 10 frigates, all built for speed and equipped with the latest stealth technology. They operated independently, striking targets of opportunity and disappearing before the Zynthians could respond. On one mission, they attacked a fuel depot orbiting a Zynthian mining colony. The depot was lightly defended, protected by only 3 cruisers. Daniel led his squadron in fast, weapons blazing. Torpedoes struck the depot's storage tanks, triggering massive explosions. The 3 cruisers tried to intercept, but the human ships were already gone, jumping into hyperspace before the enemy could target them. "Good work, everyone," Daniel transmitted to his squadron. "That depot supplied their southern fleet. They will feel this loss for months. Now let us get home before they send reinforcements." But the victories came with a cost. Human colonies still suffered under the blockades. Food shortages began, medical supplies ran low. People started to wonder how long they could hold out. The Xinthians were playing a long game, and they had more resources to draw on. Helen stood on the bridge of the Dreadnought, which now served as mobile command for human forces. The massive ship moved between systems, providing support wherever it was needed most, but even the Dreadnought could not be everywhere at once. "Admiral, we just received a distress call from Tau Ceti Colony," Kate reported. "Xinthian forces are attacking. 3 cruisers. The local defense force is outnumbered. How long until we can get there?" Helen asked. 4 hours at maximum speed, too long. Send word to the nearest frigate squadron. Tell them to engage immediately. We will support as soon as we arrive. It was like this every day. Attacks coming from multiple directions. Human forces spread thin, trying to defend everything. The Xinthians were slowly bleeding them dry. Something had to change. The change came from an unexpected source. Species across the galaxy had watched the war between humanity and the Xinthian Imperium with growing interest. They saw how humans fought, how they refused to surrender despite overwhelming odds, and they began to wonder if they too could resist the Imperium. The first to act were the Krellin, a species conquered by the Xinthians 50 years ago. They had been forced to serve as auxiliary troops in the Xinthian military, but when ordered to attack a human colony, they refused. Instead, they turned their weapons on their Xinthian commanders and declared independence. The rebellion spread like wildfire. Within weeks, 3 more species declared independence. The Xinthians found themselves fighting multiple wars simultaneously. Their forces, already stretched thin by the human conflict, began to collapse in some sectors. Emperor Zalthros watched his empire fracture and felt something close to despair. Everything was falling apart. The humans had done more than just defend themselves. They had inspired rebellion across his entire empire. Species he had ruled for centuries were rising up, and he did not have the ships to stop them all. "Recall the blockade fleets," Zalthros ordered. "We need those ships to crush these rebellions before they spread further. The humans can wait." "But my emperor," one advisor protested, "if we lift the blockades, the humans will resupply their colonies. All the progress we made will be lost, I am aware of that," Zalthros snapped. "But if we do not deal with these rebellions immediately, we will lose entire sectors of the Imperium. The humans have already won this phase of the war. They forced us to abandon our strategy. Now we must focus on holding what we have." When the Xinthian blockades lifted, humanity breathed a collective sigh of relief. Supply ships immediately began moving between colonies. Food arrived. Medicine reached hospitals. The immediate crisis was over. But everyone knew the war was not finished. The Xinthians would return. They always did. Secretary General Linda Hayes addressed the human population. "Today we have achieved a great victory. The Xinthian blockades have been lifted. Our colonies are safe for now. But this victory did not come from our strength alone. Species across the galaxy saw what we did. They saw that the Imperium could be resisted. And they rose up. We are no longer fighting alone." She paused, looking directly into the camera. "The war is not over. The Xinthians will rebuild. They will come at us again. But now they face a galaxy that has learned to fight back. Humanity showed the way. We proved that even the mightiest empire can be challenged. And that changes everything." On the Dreadnought, Helen gathered her senior staff. Daniel had returned from his raiding missions. Kate had compiled intelligence reports from across the galaxy. Paul had completed upgrades to the ship's systems. They all looked tired, worn down by months of constant fighting. But their eyes still held that fire. "The Xinthians are dealing with rebellions in a dozen sectors," Kate reported. "Their military is stretched thinner than it has ever been. Intelligence suggests they are considering a negotiated settlement with us. They want to focus on saving their empire." "Do we accept?" Daniel asked. "We have achieved our goal. Earth is safe. The colonies are secure. Maybe it is time to make peace." Helen was quiet for a moment. She thought about all the people who had died. The ships destroyed. The colonies attacked. The Xinthians had started this war believing humans were primitives to be conquered. They needed to understand they were wrong. "We will negotiate," Helen finally said, "but on our terms. Full recognition of human sovereignty. Reparations for the damages they caused." 5 years after the war ended, humanity had transformed beyond recognition. The species that once huddled on a single world now sprawled across 50 star systems. New colonies were founded every month. Trade routes connected distant worlds. And everywhere you looked, humans were building, growing, thriving. Admiral Helen Grant had retired from active service. She was 63 now, her hair fully silver and her face lined with the weight of command. But her eyes still held that sharp intelligence that had saved humanity. She spent her days teaching at the new Naval Academy on Mars, training the next generation of officers. Captain Daniel Morgan had been promoted to admiral and given command of the entire human fleet. Under his leadership, the Navy had grown from 70 ships to over 300. New dreadnoughts were under construction, though none matched the size of the original. That ship remained unique, a symbol of what humanity could achieve when pushed to the edge. The dreadnought itself had been converted into a museum and memorial. It orbited Earth, its weapons deactivated but its hull still bearing the scars of battle. Millions of visitors came every year to walk its corridors and learn about the war. Children stood in awe before the Helios cannon. Veterans came to remember fallen friends, and everyone who visited left with a renewed sense of what humanity was capable of. Kate Sullivan had taken Helen's place as tactical instructor at the academy. She was a commander now, respected by everyone who served with her. She taught her students not just how to fight, but how to think. How to turn disadvantages into advantages. How to win when the odds said you should lose. One afternoon, Helen walked through the academy grounds and found Kate drilling a group of young cadets. The students were running tactical simulations, facing impossible odds against a superior enemy. Helen watched with interest as they struggled with the problem. "What do you see?" Kate asked the cadets after they failed their third attempt. A young cadet stepped forward. "The enemy has superior numbers and firepower, sir. We cannot win a direct engagement. We need to use terrain and hit-and-run tactics." Kate nodded. "Good. But what else? What is the enemy's weakness?" The cadets looked at each other confused. Finally, another spoke up. "They are used to winning? They expect us to follow conventional tactics?" "Exactly," Kate said. "The greatest weakness any enemy can have is confidence. They think they know how you will fight, so you fight differently. You surprise them. You make them question everything they thought they knew. That is how humanity won the war. Not through better weapons or more ships. Through better thinking." Helen smiled as she listened. Kate had learned well. The next generation would be even better prepared than they had been. And that gave her hope for the future. Across the galaxy, the peace held. The Zynthian Imperium had honored the treaty. They rebuilt their military but focused on defense rather than conquest. Emperor Zalthros had died 2 years ago, replaced by his daughter Zara. She was younger and more pragmatic, willing to work with other species rather than dominate them. The rebel species that had fought alongside humanity formed an alliance called the Free Worlds Coalition. Together with humanity, they created a new power block in the galaxy. They traded freely, defended each other against threats, and slowly built a better future. But not everyone was happy with the new order. Some Zynthian military commanders believed the Empire should have kept fighting. They thought Zalthros had surrendered too easily. These hardliners gathered support in secret, planning to restore the Empire to its former glory. Admiral Daniel Morgan received intelligence reports about this growing movement. He stood in his office on the new flagship, the Indomitable, and studied the data with concern. Commander Kate Sullivan, now his chief of staff, stood beside him. "They call themselves the Restoration Front," Kate explained. Led by General Theron, one of Zalthros's former commanders, they believe the Empire should take back what they lost. Intelligence suggests they have been building ships in secret for the past year. "How many ships?" Daniel asked, unknown, "but enough to be a threat." "They are planning something. We just do not know what yet." Daniel stared at the star map on his display. 5 years of peace. 5 years of growth. He had hoped they would have longer before facing another crisis. But history never rested. Notify the Free Worlds Coalition. If the Restoration Front attacks, we need to be ready to respond together. The threat materialized 3 months later. The Restoration Front struck without warning, attacking a Krellan colony on the edge of the old Imperium. 20 warships appeared and demanded the colony surrender to renewed Zynthian rule. When the Krellan refused, the Restoration Front opened fire. The Krellan defense fleet fought bravely but was outnumbered. They sent out a distress call, knowing that help might come too late. But this time they were not alone. Humanity remembered what it was like to fight overwhelming odds. They would not abandon their allies. Admiral Daniel Morgan led a task force of 30 ships to the Krellin colony. They arrived 6 hours after the attack began. The Restoration Front ships were still engaged, systematically destroying the colony's defenses. Daniel did not wait for them to notice his arrival. All ships attack pattern Delta. We hit them hard and we hit them now. The human fleet struck like a hammer. Missiles streaked across space. Rail cannons fired in devastating volleys. The Restoration Front ships, surprised by the sudden attack, tried to regroup. But they had not fought humans before. They did not understand what they were facing. General Theron commanded the Restoration fleet from his flagship, the Vindication. He was an old warrior, scales scarred from 100 battles. He had served under Zalthros for decades, and believed deeply that the Imperium should rule the galaxy. These humans were anomalies, primitives who had gotten lucky. He would show them what real warriors could do. All ships concentrate fire on their flagship, Theron ordered. Destroy their command ship and the rest will flee. But Daniel had learned from the war. He did not expose his flagship unnecessarily. The Indomitable hung back, coordinating the attack while smaller, more agile ships took the lead. The Restoration ships found themselves fighting an enemy that refused to stand still, that struck from unexpected angles, that used every advantage of speed and maneuverability. The battle was short but brutal. Within 2 hours, the Restoration Front had lost 8 ships. The rest retreated, jumping into hyperspace before they could be destroyed. The human fleet pursued but could not catch them all. Daniel stood on his bridge and watched the enemy disappear. We hurt them, but they will be back. This is just the beginning. Notify all human colonies and our allies in the Free Worlds Coalition. Everyone needs to be on alert. The news of the attack spread quickly. The fragile peace was threatened, but this time the response was different. Species across the galaxy rallied together. The new Zynthian Empress, Zara, publicly condemned the Restoration Front and offered military support to hunt them down. Other species contributed ships and resources. The galaxy had learned from humanity. Standing together was stronger than standing alone. A coalition fleet was assembled, combining human ships with vessels from a dozen other species. They hunted the Restoration Front across multiple systems, destroying supply bases and cutting off escape routes. General Theron realized too late that the galaxy had changed. He could not restore the old empire because that empire no longer fit the new reality. The final battle took place in the asteroid field where the Restoration Front had hidden their main base. The coalition fleet surrounded them, giving them one chance to surrender. Theron refused, determined to die fighting rather than accept defeat. His ships emerged from the asteroids and engaged the coalition forces. The battle was fierce, but the outcome was never in doubt. The Restoration Front fought with the fury of desperation, but they faced not one species, not one fleet, but a united galaxy. Ships from a dozen worlds worked together with practiced coordination. Human frigates covered Krellin cruisers. Cynthian loyalist ships fought alongside former enemies. The new order proved its strength through unity. General Theron died when his flagship exploded under combined fire from 3 different species. His dream of restoring the old empire died with him. The surviving Restoration ships surrendered, their crews realizing they were fighting for a past that could never return. After the battle, representatives from all the coalition species gathered on a space station at the edge of human territory. They signed a new treaty, the Galactic Cooperation Accord. It established rules for peaceful interaction between species, methods for resolving disputes, and protocols for mutual defense. It was not perfect, but it was a start. Admiral Daniel Morgan stood with the other representatives as the treaty was signed. He looked around the room and saw something remarkable. Species that had been enemies were now allies. The galaxy was learning to work together instead of conquering each other. And it had all started because humanity refused to surrender. Helen Grant watched the treaty signing on a view screen from her office at the Naval Academy. She smiled as she saw Daniel represent humanity with dignity and strength. The young captain she had trained had become a great leader. Humanity was in good hands. A knock came at her door. Kate Sullivan entered holding 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to Helen and sat down. "We did it, Admiral. We changed the galaxy.